So welcome to the podcast of Female Talent Journeys to Success. Obviously, we have Vikki who's joining us today. So again, thank you so much for joining. It's going to be really interesting to find out a bit about your story, your background, your drivers, and some words of wisdom, hopefully. I suppose just to kind of kick us off, it'd be good to do an introduction on both sides. So from my end, so I'm Anna, I work for Interquest. So they're a global search consultancy business. I'm based in their European headquarters of Amsterdam, and we focus all across the Benelux region within the risk, legal, compliance, and financial space. Over to you.
Thanks, Anna. I'm Vikki. I am the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary at NIBC Bank, based in the Netherlands, though you can possibly tell from my accent that I am English by origin, but moved around a lot. Lived and worked in France for many years, and then in the Netherlands now for 15 years.
Wow. So I suppose it'd be great just to kind of start from the very beginning of that and kind of how you got to the Netherlands and everything in between, because where your journey started, just a bit about your early years. But I think it's also really important just to understand what motivated you to get into your career field. And if there was anyone or any specific moment that sort of inspired that journey to move you down that legal route.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I look back at my career and it's all a series of fortuitous accidents, I would say, in many ways. I talk to a lot of people.
Sometimes it's the best way.
Well, maybe. I talk to these people who have these great plans, and I don't think that's really the case with me. There was no overarching great plan, but, the law generally I got into from I remember my sister and mother having to go to court as a witness to a road accident. And I think I was about 10. And it was more, I got dragged along because my mother couldn't leave me at home. And I just really enjoyed it. That sounds really odd, perhaps. And and that for me was my first introduction. There's no legal professionals in our family at all. No, quite the opposite. They come from an agricultural background, actually. So I ended up wanting to become a lawyer at the age of 10, and it didn't really change. So went from there, university, did law, went to law school, and then went to London and did my articles there, and qualified into Allen & Overy. And so you said, were there people that inspired you? Yes, I was very lucky to have the partner there who was the head of the department, which is leverage finance, was an inspiration in many, many ways. Sometimes in how I would not want to be as a lawyer, because it's quite a traditional view on the world and behaviour, not necessarily in a bad way, but just of its time, if I can put it that way. Mm. And he gave so many opportunities, and through him, I was given the opportunity to move to the Paris office and to spend a couple of years there. So I went to Paris for 2 years and ended up staying nearly 10. So
I was going to say, how did you find it in Paris? Because we have, it can be like Marmite there, purely due to sort of language barriers most of the time.
Yeah, well, I loved it. I still love France. I go back quite often. It helped that I spoke some relatively basic French, I suppose, but it got better very quickly because it needed to. Yeah. You will enjoy, well, it's the same everywhere, whether it's Paris or anywhere. If you get into the local culture, you're going to get so much more out of it. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's the same in life generally, right? You get out what you put in. Mm-hmm. And so it was a bit of a culture shock at first, in some ways. You didn't really know anybody. But there were a lot of people in the office who just really helped. And I suppose that has been true of my whole career. It's just seizing opportunities. I'm not sure that I necessarily go out looking for them. Perhaps I should. I'm maybe a bit lazy, I guess. But these opportunities, when they present themselves, I've taken. And I just had a lot of fun. I worked hard, but I had a lot of fun too. So I ended up staying in Paris for many years, and whilst in Paris, met my to-be husband, who happened to be Dutch. So, which is what eventually brought me to the Netherlands. So, as I say, there was no great plan. It was more adapting to what happened.
That's almost a more exciting way of doing it, because then you're just allowing it to sort of unravel as it plays rather than having a pre-construed plan of exactly where you need to be and where you want to go. And if we could have taken you back to your London days, Paris and the Netherlands probably may not have been in that plan.
Probably. And I always say, well, people sometimes ask me, which do you prefer? I like all of them. And, I love London, I love Paris, I love the Netherlands. And life would have been quite different, of course, if I'd stayed in London. And that would have been fine and wonderful too. So you just you adapt to what you're presented with and just enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I think that's always the best way to do it. It's just take it, run with it, and try and make the best out of the situation that you have. And I suppose looking at your career as well from a legal perspective, obviously legal forms a lot of different parts and specialises in different areas. What was the route or kind of specialism that you chose? And if you've changed that across your career, is there any particular reason why, or kind of any preferred route that you've enjoyed most?
Well, it's funny, really, because when I was at A&O, I did leverage finance primarily, and I do zero leverage finance now in my current role. But law, to a large extent, involves the same skills, whatever part of it is. It's the ability to read and understand, but also apply the techniques to different areas and to make it work in a way that works for lots of different people and factors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of different specialisms. And I suppose the way my career developed in terms of the areas of law was I followed the client to a large extent when I was in private practice. So I was working on leveraged finance deals, but the clients weren't necessarily in that kind of silo. So they would come back to me and say, oh, I have a telecoms financing, which was in Eastern Europe. And so I ended up working on that because I was following the client, if you will. And that then led to another telecoms deal. So I did a couple in Bulgaria. And then there was one in Ukraine. And then there was another that involved, well, not telecoms, but another transaction through the same client that involved working in Boston and Moscow. So it just developed because of the people.
I think that's also a really important part of it as well, as it does consistently change. And I could imagine kind of looking at it from a legal construct of leverage finance in the UK in terms of a telecommunications deal in Bulgaria has a lot of different attributes and changes to it at the same time.
Yeah, I think it boils down to trying to find a solution that works for everyone. And that's no different whether it's a London or UK only transaction where you're based in London or in Bulgaria, where we were doing a privatization on telecoms there and it hadn't been done before. So there was no tried and tested route. So you're just finding a solution. You're not trying to win or do better than anyone else. You're just trying to find a solution that works. And I think that's true of the best deals that are done, to take the different needs and maybe challenges and just puzzle it out and find a solution that works.
Yeah, and I suppose with your work involving so many different legal aspects against it as well, how would you ensure that the content remains fairly relevant and also impactful, particularly as you kind of flicker through different industries as well?
Ask a lot of questions and just realize that you probably don't know it all, or you definitely don't know it all. I often say that the thing I say most often is, I don't know. Yeah. And that's fine. There's no shame or harm in saying you don't know, but then you go and find out. You talk to people. You stay current by being open to developments and open to the fact that you might not know it all. You might have known it all yesterday, but not today. So keep curious, keep reading a lot of things. If you see something that you think, well, that's interesting, or, oh, that sounds strange, follow it up, ask someone a question. They might not know, but they'll probably put you onto somebody who does. So keep asking questions, stay open-minded, and just keep reading and asking, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think from the actual industry perspective, it's so rapidly evolving. and changing, needs and demands, but also legal concepts are taken more seriously. But the agility behind sort of how people use legal and kind of the frameworks behind it and the application of it in the business is completely different. And so by sort of putting blinkers on almost and not asking questions or looking outside the box or trying to find a solution, which is in a bit of a grey area rather than black and white, is pretty much the only way forwards now, just because of the evolving landscape behind it.
I agree. And I think it's really important to have people around you that fill in your blind spots, if you will. You cannot be good at everything. You just can't. It's not possible. No. Maybe you can, but I certainly can't. So you need people around you that you trust to know what they're doing and to come to you when they don't know as well, so you can complement each other. And don't expect yourself to understand everything. Apply things that they tell you need to apply and understand. And it doesn't matter if you don't then become an expert in that area. If you have somebody you trust who is, you can take from it what you need to complement your own knowledge and skills, and not see it as a threat that they might be an expert in that area. That's fabulous. Use it, learn from it, and take what you need of it and give back what they may need to make it more relevant to the area. And again, a lot of us are now working with a lot of AI and looking to use it more and more.
Yeah.
And I think that's great that we can actually do things better, not necessarily even quicker though, maybe, but because some of the simpler stuff is taken care of, you can actually do more and get more out of it. But am I ever going to understand how to code? Am I ever going to understand exactly how it works in the background? No, and I don't need to, because there are people who are fabulous at that, who take care of it, educate me on what the possibilities are and what I can do to make my area benefit from it and to use it for the team and for the company.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I suppose artificial intelligence we see used a lot in, for example, risk or fraud analytics, but we never really hear about it from a legal perspective or in what areas you would use AI or anything kind of more technological, particularly due to kind of processes and procedures. So how and sort of where would you use that in a legal field?
Well, I don't claim to be an expert, and for me, at least, it's very much in its infancy. We're trying it, but AI, as it's coming, is a lot more sophisticated than AI we've been using already. Like we have, where I work rather, we use robots to do certain tasks, and it's very basic AI. I'm sure the experts would say it's very, very basic, but they're saving us a lot of time. Like simple requests from bailiffs where you just check whether a name matches in the various files you have around the bank. Now, a few years ago, that would have been a manual process. It's just now a robot does it, it's automatic. Very basic AI. It's not intelligent in the sense of it's not learning, but that is a basic use. There's a lot more coming. As the bank I work for, we're a small bank, so you do things in I'd say in a more a bit by bit approach. Some of the larger banks or institutions and also the law firms will have large departments focused on exactly this. So for a company like us as well, it's very much seeing what others are developing, what has been useful to them, and seeing, well, could that fit for us? How could we adapt that in our own way to cater to the needs of our clients, both internal clients as a legal department, but also the external clients, which ultimately is what it's all about. Can we do things in a way that is quicker and more efficient for them? But also a lot of AI, you can take out the human mistakes that come just through being human beings, whilst in a way that you still need to understand how it works so that it's not a complete black box and you can check that it's doing the right thing. But you're potentially taking out bias that comes in automatically from having humans involved in it. So there are a lot of possibilities, but it's very much I think it's in its infancy, but it's here, it's coming, and it will develop fast.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And do you find there's some resistance sometimes, particularly within the legal side, of a trust element to the belief with by sort of the development of, or the kind of generation of what they're doing, in aside to having someone sort of manually go through and piece the puzzle?
Yeah, I think the resistance comes from fear of the unknown, doesn't it? I think, and lawyers typically, they want to know and understand everything.
Yeah,
but
it's very much
we
they have to be in the know of completely anything that's generated or developed. So how easy is it to get them to change their mindset at the same time as getting the wider business to trust the outcome?
I think you need to, it's partly to an extent, it's about repetition, repeating to people over and over again what they need to know, and just reassure them there are other people who know and understand the more technical side of it, and that's their job. Trust them. So, and seeing the developments, I think it's much easier to get buy-in when you can show the tangible results of it. So because it's in its infancy, seeing the use cases, it will only grow. And the more that it can be shown that things are useful in the area, it's not trying to push them out of having a job, not at all. It's allowing them to focus on what actually they are good at and where they can make a difference for the company and for clients. I was just going to say, one of the things that, sorry to interrupt you, but one of the things that makes me think of it is about self-driving cars. I remember saying, I would never want that. I would, of course, that's just an accident waiting to happen. And somebody was saying to me, well, the statistics show that with humans driving, I can't remember the percentage, X% of the time there are accidents. So there will always be accidents when you've got humans driving. And actually, the percentage of accidents with self-driving cars is getting less and less. So yes, there will always inevitably be mistakes, but the same is true of human drivers. And it sounds really obvious, and maybe it was just me who had a kind of light bulb moment, but I thought, well, yeah, fair enough. It's actually letting go of that control, which doesn't come naturally maybe to a lawyer.
No.
You just need to realise that it's actually going to improve the outcome if you take yourself out of the equation.
It's a really interesting sentence there, but it's also very, very ringing true. And I think by sort of putting it as an analogy against automatic driving cars is a really great reference, because we're so wanting to be in control and wanting this, but we cause crashes still, and we cause a lot of incidents. Whereas if you have more of a self-driving car, it's taking us out the equation and having a lot more sort of dynamic against it, and a bit more of a forward thinking or development from it as well. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, but it's also getting people to do the one thing we hate doing, and particularly in the legal field, is letting go and letting something else have control over deals or transactions or commercial contracts that are going through as well.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
You have to.
I don't see it being an easy task.
No, it's really not. But I think it's a question as well of trusting other people around you. And understanding what you need to understand, and trusting others to do their job and to do it well. And therefore, you don't need to check it. And that's true in the legal world. It's true in the technical world. As long as you trust that they've done the right tests, and they've done the right trainings, or it's the same, just trusting. And yes, I know that you have to go through jump through certain loops before you get to the point where you trust, but you do have to let go and trust at some point.
Yeah,
but it is
I suppose it's even like team members, of when you've finished a part of your bit, handing what you've done over to someone else to build on it. And that kind of comes down to the trust factor of putting it in a manual situation. And I suppose it's automatically just the same as you move into more of a technology orientation as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, and also just agreeing who does what in a task. So in a project, and it's not that it belongs to you, you are contributing to it, and then it moves along. And it might be an iterative process. It comes back, it goes to them, but you don't own it. No. And it's also giving credit to the people who are involved along the way, because it's not very rewarding if you've worked very, very hard on something and you hand it over and somebody runs with it and you never hear about it again. And I don't mean just giving them a compliment saying thank you very much, But that's, that is important. That's just how you get incentivized perhaps as well. But it's also understanding what's happened to it and how it grew into something else. And that's about communication, and it's treating people right along the way so that they understand that what they did at the beginning was valuable, was important, and led to a good outcome later on.
I think that's just the importance of consistency throughout, but also just knowing when to let go. And I suppose we've touched on this a little bit as well, but obviously from legal processes and procedures throughout your career, how has that sort of changed or enhanced or developed that from a technological perspective?
Oh, massively. Yeah. I mean, if I think back to the beginning of my career, it's just paper everywhere. And
God, if we saw any of that now, the regulator would have a heart attack.
Yeah, but I mean, but on the other hand, in the way, it's not that different in the sense that I like lists and I'm quite organized in that sense, but now it's a digital list, and I get the prompts to do it. So it's the same techniques in some ways, that you just need to go through something very methodically. But there's a lot of tools to help you along the way now, more than just a piece of paper and a pen.
A filing cabinet.
I'm perhaps exaggerating my age now, but now I'll just put something in the diary so I don't forget it in a week's time. Or you've got the Microsoft tools that you've just got reminders for when to do it and block out the time automatically for a certain task. So it's just makes it slightly easier, but the techniques are the same, of being methodical, making sure that things don't fall through the cracks, that everyone is clear on who's doing what and how you work together, working out what you need to know of others, what they need to know of you, agreeing on deadlines, and managing each other's expectations. And so a lot of the techniques are the same, but there are just better tools maybe to allow you to concentrate and apply your time and skills on what you can bring to it, rather than on the organizational side of it.
Yeah, no, I completely see that as well. And I think if you look at it from like a manual perspective to now, the influence and development and pace of work that's actually able to be done, as well as the kind of in-depth, more analysis and detail behind it, probably emphasizes it just due to the usages of that as well.
Absolutely, because the knowledge that you before might have had to go and explore and find, it's just there. So now you can take that as that's the basic, and then you can just think about it and put the layer of experience and weaving the knowledge you have together to find a good outcome. You just have to spend less time and effort perhaps on the basics. So you can apply you can add on the expertise, which is what actually brings, whether it's a project or a deal, or it can just simply be an internal thing that, you've got the experience. You can just find out what has been done before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Take the experience that others have brought and say, okay, fine, that's a given. Now, what do I do with that to bring it to a state where it's useful for us?
Yeah, I tell you what, my CEO would love that, because he is a huge advocate of reinventing the wheel. And with each and every PowerPoint, we're very much infused to go and look at how we can reinvent the wheel. So that one I've heard a lot of and clearly works a lot. And following from what has happened, and it's clearly a really fast changing and quite evolving landscape that you work in. If we're sort of looking forwards, what would you say is the trend which may define the next sort of 5 years for a legal field?
Ooh.
It's a big question, isn't it?
If only I had a crystal ball. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's finding a way to keep on top of things while staying open-minded, because there's a lot of things out there that you could find it pushes you in one direction or another, and maybe just keeping that wider perspective of putting it into context, because I think it's very easy to get sucked into an area that's very technical, very changing very fast. And that can be useful, but suddenly in what I do, working in a bank, you need to look across the landscape and saying, well, that might work, might be really useful in that sense, but you've got to look at the bigger picture. Is it the right thing to do? So certainly, I mean, I'm biased because I work in bank rather than private practice. I think when you're very specialized, it's fine to look at the technical side of it and get very, very expert in that area.
Mm-hmm.
But if I look at what I do, it may be right what somebody's telling you, but it might not be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so keeping that balance of being able to apply the techniques in a way that works in other areas and takes all aspects into account, certainly when I look at my role, is very much a focus area.
I think that's also just being able to sort of separate what's important to you as to what's important to the rest of the business and the impacts, because I always see it as like a group effort. And so if you're changing and kind of developing one area, it probably impacts product, it probably impacts sales. And I think it's kind of keeping quite a broad mentality as to making sure that one piece may fit for you, but it may make everyone else not be able to kind of fall in line or utilize it. So then it's a development of, and it comes back to communication of what you said earlier, of how do you then look at, everyone's got the same goal in mind of wanting to take the business forwards, wanting to be more time efficient from usages of technology, but how do we make it fit across the board?
Yeah, and I think certainly in an in-house legal department, you have quite an umbrella role. So you see across lots of areas. And so you see developments happening apace, and you can see that, but you're also aware of another area that perhaps has different constraints, or it might not have constraints. It might actually benefit from what's happening in another area. And so I often see that, and it's not a very legal role in the sense, it's just you happen to see across lots of different areas. And so that you can almost matchmake. You say, well, actually, they're working on this, and you've just told me you've got this problem. Perhaps you two want to go and discuss and see if you can help them. And so it doesn't actually have to be that we're acting as a brake saying, oh, you're carrying on this area, be careful. It might actually be the opposite, saying they're off down this area and they're doing great stuff and using AI or just developing themselves. And that could bring you up and help you as well. So, you share your expertise and you help each other.
I think it's just being open to understanding, although you specialize in, I don't know, financial crime. Product can help you progress the process of financial crime. So it's being open to talk to people sort of outside of your teams and your specialism to see how it kind of interconnects. And then you'll learn something to be able to sort of develop what you're already doing. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that. And it's quite easy to as well when you're kind of in one team and you're focusing on one thing, you're sort of using each other and balancing off each other to kind of learn how they do it. But in the broader aspect, it impacts a lot more people that can potentially help, and also vice versa for them to them as well, of the kind of progress of the company.
Yeah, totally. And we all have our different skill sets. So somebody who's a real expert in, financial crime legislation and what you need to do to deal with legislation regulation, great. And you need that. But you also probably need the person who talks to the clients, to the customers, who understands how it works for them, how they can respond to the demands placed on them. And it won't be the same as the person who's the compliance or legal person will think, maybe, partly because all customers are different. And with the sales team or the marketing team or just the people speaking to the customers day to day, probably are much better placed to feed back into the organization what the customer wants and what the customer can do to make this a smoother process. And so it's those different skill sets and bringing them together and being open and not proud, not thinking you know it all, because you can't. It's not your job to know it all. It's your job to listen to people who do have the expertise to feed back to you, which you can then learn from and say, well, I can make what I need to do to comply with the law work in a way that still respects what the customer wants, what they are expecting from us, and what makes their life easier.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a lot of interconnected parts with that, from customer to internal to the team to the wider team. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you faced with that from an industry perspective, and kind of how do you see it changing, or what solution would you have to kind of see that coming down?
Yeah, if I have the solution again.
Yeah.
Lucky me.
It'd be like the little magic ball analogy
if
over
only,
again.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where it comes back to AI really helping. It's because it's a lack of time. I mean, it's the hardest resource to find, right? And that's why AI can just be a game changer in time, probably, because it will save you time. And it's not pushing people out of a job, it's just making things more efficient so you can do more and do it better. So I think the greatest challenge is lack of time, because there's just so much to do, especially in a changing world, keeping on top of changing legislation, changing regulation, but also just changing opinions in the wider world. You know, the world, it seems to be moving very, very fast, whether that's geopolitical developments, you know, a lot of regulation. It has been coming apace. Perhaps it's slowed down a little bit, though we're still dealing with the rollout of a lot of legislation. And what you don't want with legislation is to turn it into a box checking exercise. The whole point of legislation is to respond to what the greater good has decided is necessary or useful. And it hasn't decided that so that you can check a box. It's so that it achieves an end, such as through, you know, sustainability reporting. It's not there so that we can all say tick, 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 done that. It's so that you can be more transparent, so that you can hopefully, you know, move things along in terms of the green agenda. But if it's just, there's so much to do.
Huge part of it as well.
It's huge. Yeah, it is absolutely huge. And it's, you know, sometimes you need to step back and say, why are we doing this? Well, it's because we need to for the planet. It's not because we need to check the box and publish it. No, that's how you get there. And if there's so much to do that you have no choice but just to plow through and check, 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 done that one, you don't have time to think about the why and what you're trying to achieve. So for me, at least, I think one of the biggest challenges is having time to think about the why of what you're doing, so that you do it in a way that's actually achieving something good and useful.
I hear that a lot. It's just reminding people of the why.
Oh, and I thought I was so original.
The challenge, very original, but everyone always breaks it down as to everyone needs to understand why, what they're doing, what they're adding, because otherwise we just kind of walk along blind almost, and people don't understand what their impact is from the work that they're doing. And the green piece is huge. If we look at kind of today's generation, they're really focused on sustainability and ethical approaches in business, but also what's your carbon footprint and kind of how green is the business. And rather than just saying it, what are they actually proactively doing to ensure that, both internally and sort of externally as well? And it does break down to, you know, we're doing this, why, this is what we want, and this is where we want to go, which also comes from quite transparent communication, which historically, a long time ago now, wasn't really there. People were asked to do jobs without really understanding the bigger picture of what they need it for and what it's contributing to.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that you have to really explain to people what their role is contributing to it. But on the flip side of that is, again, coming back to trust, that people trust that what they are doing is important in the bigger picture, and they don't necessarily need to understand everything, because they trust that somebody who's managing the flow, if you will, does know how it all fits together. So it comes back to, yes, understanding why you're being asked to do something, but at some point saying, okay, I know enough and I trust them to apply what I'm doing to put it into the ultimate outcome or project or where you're trying to get to. And yeah, it's again understanding, but knowing when you can say, I don't understand everything, but they do, and I trust them too.
Yeah, and I think that's a really kind of big thing, particularly from like a leadership or management perspective, of actually applying that and showing that the trust is there and
in both directions, right?
Yeah.
It's not just trusting the leadership have that, but it's also the leadership trusting the people giving you the information, that they know what they're doing. You don't need to hover over them. You don't need to double check or triple check everything. You trust them to give it to you. They've done their piece, and that moves on to the next, and together you'll reach the outcome.
No, absolutely. And obviously you work in a really fast-paced organisation. How do you kind of ensure that your team stays motivated but also aligned with the company vision?
Well, again, it's about communication, isn't it? And it's not that I have the magic outcome, but it's continuously talking to people. And I think it's also trying to enjoy each other's company. You know, you're going to do something better if you enjoy what you do. Yeah, and that's just a fact. It doesn't mean you have to enjoy every single thing you do.
You're not going to love every day.
No, it's just not possible, is it? Yeah. No, but as long as what you do enjoy outweighs what you don't enjoy, maybe that's good enough, and you just have to accept it. But ultimately, try and enjoy what you're doing, but enjoy the people you work with. Yeah. And I think if you spend more time actually understanding your team, you're more likely to understand what the hiccups along the way might be. They're more likely to understand you. You know, when you come in the morning and you've had a bad morning already and you come in with a face like thunder, they'll probably know you well enough to recognize that and give you the benefit of the doubt that this isn't the case every day, and to, you know, pick their moments to interact with you, to ask questions. And so understanding each other and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the right thing, that they know what they're doing, and this is what they need. If somebody asks you for something, there's a good reason. It's leading to an important outcome for the company, for the customers. Talking to each other and making people feel included. There's nothing worse than feeling left out, whether that's at work or in, you know, friendship or whatever. No one wants to feel left out. Some people may choose to leave themselves out, and that's fine. That's entirely up to them. But if someone is pushing them out or leaving them out or taking credit for the work they've done, that's a horrible feeling. Yeah. So I think it's important to keep remembering that. Easier said than done sometimes, and again, it's important to have a good team around you who you trust and they trust you to say, hang on a minute, you say you behave like this, but actually you didn't yesterday, and I don't like this. So they can tell you that, and they trust you to take it, and you trust them to actually do it. And that helps make it a nicer place and better place. And if people are enjoying it, they will perform better.
Well, we spend the majority of our time with colleagues rather than family. So it's important to sort of
my children would agree.
It's important to have that sort of clear-cut communication, but also just an understanding of each other, so you can have a laugh while you're sat there working as a team rather than just silence, because it just becomes really, you just get very kind of bogged down with it all. It needs that element of light, even in sort of stressful situations, which I think is kind of driven from the top, but also from team and team members themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking back to the beginning of this conversation, you asked me about moments that really influenced me. I remember a long time ago now, the partner I was working for when I was in private practice asked me to speak to a client about something. I can't remember what it was, not important. And I sent him an email, and this partner came to me. I told you to speak to them. Pick up the phone. I said, okay, you're going to take them out for lunch and get to know them. And it was just, we went out, it was a difficult client. They do exist sometimes. And, went for lunch. And I don't think we talked about work for a minute. We're talking about football. We're talking about favourite restaurants, films. I can't remember. And the transaction I was working on, after that moment, it ran so much better. It's still quite a tricky client, but I felt able to talk to them on a human level, just say, oh, this is why I can't do it tomorrow, or why it might take me a bit longer. I could bring a hard message across because we'd connected on a human level. Yeah. And so I think you just spend the time to get to know someone. And it's time well spent. It makes it more enjoyable, but it's likely also to lead to a better outcome for what you're working on because they understand where you're coming from. And it's not just a clash of communication styles. You start to understand each other better.
Do you know what? I'm an advocate for that, of sometimes just stripping back all the professional outer layer and just having a normal conversation. Yeah. I think there's so much, and it goes such a long way just to be able to say, how was your grandson's birthday? How was the holiday? Are you doing your favourite trip this year? And having a personal touch on a professional development, I think adds for a more fruitful, if I can speak, relationship, but also just makes it that little bit easier to work together because there is that human element to it rather than just what can be seen as a transactional service.
Yeah, I totally agree. And everyone's different. Some people have different boundaries for what they want to share about their personal life or whatever. Yeah. And that's fine. That's totally understandable. You should respect that. But you need to have spent a bit of time or made an effort to get to know them in order to know that even that.
Yeah.
And that where do their boundaries start? And that doesn't mean we're all going to suddenly become psychologists and, it's a completely different profession for a reason. But you can't expect to become professional at it, but you can be interested in them and try to understand them. They're going to appreciate it. You're going to have an easier way of working with them, which you probably enjoy more as well. Yeah. And you will all get more out of it. It is easier said than done because, again, it takes time. And when we're busy, you just want to focus on get this done and move it on. But it shouldn't fall out the sides then. The human touch, that's probably when it's all the more important. But it's really hard to achieve. But you just have to try and remember it. And also, like I said before, have people who are brave enough or safe enough to remind you if you're just moved into hyper-focus mode trying to get it done. Then you need the people to remind you, Vikki, you said you would do this and don't forget. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's just no matter how much you have to do, it takes 2 minutes just to ask a couple of questions on how someone is, what they've been doing, if their favourite team won the football game or something like that. And I think
obviously unless it was against your own, but that's enough.
Yeah, totally unless it's against your own, then you just utterly cheer.
Yeah, just move on swiftly.
Yeah. Just absolutely bypass that. But look, no, I suppose it's kind of starting to wind this down now and just focusing on kind of wrapping this up. Looking back at kind of your career and other people aspiring to get into the legal field or having a focus on wanting to take that journey, is there any advice that you would offer to those people aiming to make an impact on all of these different industries but across the same sort of field?
Well, I would say be flexible, stay flexible. When something comes along that's different to what you had expected, that doesn't make it bad. Just try it. And that's the other thing, I think, is to take the opportunities, but don't say, well, if I do that, what if I don't like it? Well, then you change it again. That's okay. So I'd say keep taking the opportunities and don't be afraid to find that you actually didn't like it at all. Fine. That's a useful outcome as well. Then you change again. So maybe this comes back to at the beginning, I said I didn't have a really great plan. But yeah, I just to an extent go with the flow. But along the way, say, well, I don't like this, so I'm going to change it. But don't start off with a very, very rigid plan. See what opportunities come your way. Try them. If it doesn't work out, change it again. But just stay open to these opportunities along the way.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard sometimes, isn't it, to remain flexible against if someone's kind of set out, this is what I want and this is what I need to do. I think it's just reminding themselves to go with the flow.
Because it might be their original plan was perfect, though, so they might not need to. But, life can change things along the way. I mean, I've had my share of life events along the way that have caused me to change what I had intended to do. And so rather than saying, well, that's ruined everything, say, well, okay, it just means I need to adapt to what it is. And, not dwell on it. Doesn't mean you ignore it, but you say, okay, I can't change it, so let's do this instead, which does work with whatever life has thrown at you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose flipping that question around a little bit, if you could speak to your sort of younger self at the beginning of your career, is there any advice that you would give to your younger self going into that? That would be any different from kind of what you would give to alternative people now?
To be absolutely honest, I wouldn't change a thing that I've done. That doesn't mean I've always done it well. That's not what I'm saying at all. But even when I've made mistakes, and I've made my fair share, I've learned from them, and it's led to something else. So, and it's not that I don't want to wish to be arrogant saying I wouldn't need the advice. It's more, there's a lot of things that I look back and think, oh, it was better if I'd not done that or done something else. But I learned a lot from it. So I suppose the advice to my younger self would be to just go ahead and learn from it. Don't dwell on it, but don't forget it. But don't dwell on it, and just keep looking forward. And don't forget the past, but don't obsess about it, and just keep going.
I love that. I love the part of it. Don't forget about the past, but don't dwell on it. Sort of use it to propel yourself forwards. And that comes in a sense, and I always say it as well, it's succeed and learn rather than succeed and fail. So you're never going to get it right all the time, but as long as you're kind of taking something from what's gone wrong to kind of change it moving forwards, and you've learned something, and that can only be beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, look, it's been fantastic and extremely intriguing sort of hearing about where you started, the different areas you've been involved in, your thoughts around technology advancements, how you use them, but also kind of how you've navigated your career so successfully, whilst also just having very little plan in place and just by following the flow, and also just maximising what you have in front of you, sort of how that's led to where you are today. So look, it was really, really great to have you as part of this podcast, and thank you for sharing as much as you did with us as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been a pleasure.